You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Do we ever have a rich, exciting show today? First, we'll be speaking with Mona Eltahawy, who is our Middle East correspondent, but herself an award-winning journalist and book author, and she has been traveling recently within parts of the Muslim world, talking about why the Middle East and the Muslim world needs a sexual revolution. She's recently just back from India and from Nigeria. Then we'll be speaking with Louise Mirrer, who is the director of the New York Historical Society and is doing incredible things to put women on the map of history in New York, and I think to set a precedent for other historical collections in the country and around the world. And then last, we'll talk with Jessamyn Rodriguez about a really feel-good story for a change that empowers women, that makes them money, that does good things, and that has to do with eating. What could be better in this time of otherwise tragic headlines? And first, we have to go inside those headlines. The time lag, time cycle for this weekly program can be problematical. We can't always be up-to-the-minute timely when news breaks, which is frustrating to the journalist in me. On the other hand, it lends some space for thoughtfulness to the political analyst in me, or so I hope. The San Bernardino, California assault took place when I was still focusing on the aftermath of the attacks in Paris and Beirut and against the Russian airliner, and the almost daily occurrence of police shootings that seem to try to get across the message that black lives do not matter in this country, and the terrorist who laid siege to the Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado. Was juggling all of those. I mean, violence, which has been seeded by our national self-image of cowboy ethics and Marlboro Man loner toughness, and of course nurtured by the National Rifle Association, that image has now matured into a culture saturated by guns and toxic with testosterone. And there's always the reliable motive of having direct orders from some god to kill people. Good old religion. The San Bernardino type of attack was inevitable at some point. It's impossible to control for everything, including people so far under the radar that they don't register at all. But it's an interesting contradiction, yet another incident of cognitive dissonance, that the people who demand to be more protected by their government are the same folks who demand less or no government, but also don't want their Medicare taken away. I also can't help but notice that the xenophobic reaction to the terrorism in San Bernardino, the stunningly blatant bigotry that openly has been expressed by Donald Trump and stoked by him and by his colleagues and followers, this poisonous hatred that assumes all Muslim people are extremists eager to push their religion on others, it pays no attention whatsoever to evangelical Christians, Mormon missionaries, Jehovah's Witnesses doorbell ringing to promulgate their faith, and for that matter to one of the victims killed in San Bernardino, a colleague of the male shooter, a man who was a self-described, quote, Messianic Jew, close quote. Now, for the time being, I will leave aside all the was she or wasn't she, did she or didn't she hand-wringing about the woman, as if it were unthinkable that she could have motivated him, or that she could have been motivated by him, considering that she had had a baby 6 months earlier. The ethnic and sexist stereotypes are littering the floor. But believe it or not, there is actually a glint of some good news. We just might, be getting back a resurrected free press out of this national crisis. The New York Times ran an editorial on its front page for the first time since 1920, titling the editorial, an epidemic of guns. The Daily News, a New York tabloid not particularly notable for liberal politics, ran a front page with the banner headline, "God Can't Fix This," a comment on obscene platitudes babbled by politicians all the while they refused to pass gun control legislation. The next day, the Daily News followed this front page with another, with photographs of the California shooters, the Colorado Planned Parenthood shooter, Timothy McVeigh, yet another, you will remember, white Christian male terrorist, and Wayne LaPierre, president of the NRA, and it labeled them all terrorists. When the press does its job, it gives me hope. The other headline this week, less noticed because so much else had been happening, is that Defense Secretary Ashton Carter announced the military would open all ground combat jobs to women. Now, listen, this is so not my personal thing, but I do recognize that some women want very much to be part of the armed forces, for a number of reasons, ranging from education and benefits through family tradition to patriotism. And wherever women want to be, they should have a right to access. Moreover, the truth is that women have already been in combat positions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, just not recognized as such. And that's all the more unfair because it is precisely the formal recognition that makes you eligible for promotion to certain higher ranks. This new opening, however, is not a done deal. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, himself a Marine, has echoed the Marines' objection to this. The Marines are the only one of the services to take that position. And reliable Senator McCain, crazed old Senator McCain, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, is of course also opposed. Their pronouncements on this issue are direct dittos of those made years ago about the so-called perils of integrating the military by African Americans, and more recently by allowing openly gay women and men to serve in uniform. The claim is it will hurt unit cohesion. Of who? Apparently pale males. Actually, this shouldn't even be considered such a huge leap forward, since Israel and Canada and numerous European countries already allow women to serve in frontline combat. Nonetheless, G.I. Jane still has an uphill course to run, with a 100-pound pack on her back yet. And now it's time for our first guest. Mona Eltahawy is a writer for The Guardian and a contributing op-ed writer for The New York Times. Her new book is Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. And she has been traveling not only throughout her native Egypt and the Middle East, but also to Nigeria and India, and is continuing on through other parts of the Muslim world to talk about why Islam needs a sexual revolution. She was recently in New York, and we sat down face to face for this conversation. Here is Mona Eltahawy. Mona, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, a lot has happened since you last were here. You were the recipient of the 2015 Women's Media Center Award for Speaking Truth to Power, which God knows is what you do all the time. Most notably in the recent book, just newly out, Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. So you have been also in India and just now, as of this moment, back from Nigeria, talking about the book, talking about sexual revolution.
It's been incredible, Robin. It was really important for me that my book isn't just going to basically white Western European countries. Mm-hmm. And I have been there and I've enjoyed going there because I think feminism obviously is a global issue. Feminism is universal. Misogyny must be fought everywhere. And even in those European countries that I've taken my book to and where it's been published in various languages, many people of my own ethnic and faith background come because of the communities where Muslims live as minorities, be it in France, be it in the UK, etc., etc. But it was really important for me that I take my book to the global south, that I take my book to a country like India and most recently Nigeria, and in February I'm also going to Pakistan. And it was really important to take it there because there I'm talking as an Egyptian Muslim feminist who is talking to an audience that isn't going to say, well, you're a white woman, you don't understand us,
right,
or this is about colonization or Western imperialism or whatever. And also in going there, I'm having a conversation with feminists from the global south when I've often been confused, or rather I've often been accused of just speaking to the West and making us look bad in the eyes of them being the West,
right,
etc., etc. So when I was in India, for example, I was interviewed by a very famous television journalist there called Barkha Dutt. Barkha has 2.7 million followers on Twitter, which maybe in India is not that difficult.
India does things in big numbers.
Exactly. And so, there's Barkha, and she's read my book as, that Indian woman of Hindu descent, speaking to me, that Egyptian woman of Muslim descent. And, and she would make those connections. So she would tell me, for example, look, as a feminist, I often speak out against Hindu rituals, like, for example, women fasting. There's a ritual by which Hindu women fast for the sake of their husband's health. And she says, I tell my followers and fans, this is ridiculous, we have to stop doing this. And then Hindu women come on and say, but I choose to do this. My husband, this idea of choice,
yes, of
quote unquote choice. My husband doesn't force me to do this. And so by doing that, Barkha opens the way for me to say, well, this is how I answer women who tell me I choose to wear the hijab or I choose to wear the niqab. Because she's done that and she's been generous like that with her own cultural challenges, I can put my defenses down, because often I have to say, well, I'm telling the right-wing xenophobes this, and I'm telling the silent left-wing that, and I have to lay the groundwork for all the people that I'm fighting against,
yes,
and then finally talk about my issues. So when I'm in India, and Barkha already says that, I can then speak as a Muslim woman and talk about the rituals and cultural practices that I challenge. And the same in Nigeria, because in Nigeria I was on a book panel with a famous satirist, and the panel was moderated by one of their leading television journalists, a Nigerian Muslim woman called Kaderia Ahmed.
Yeah.
And Kaderia would understand exactly what I'm talking about, but in the Nigerian context. And I had so many young Nigerian Muslim women there, some in hijab, some not, who came up to me and said, I love your feminism. I might disagree with you about issues to do with veiling, but I want to know about this and I want to know about that. And I had young Nigerian men who came all the way from the north to see me. So young Nigerian men who are allies of feminism coming to see me, the Egyptian feminist, because they follow me on Twitter. I had one young Nigerian Muslim woman in hijab ask me if I believed it was okay for gay Muslims to marry. And I said, yes, I believe in marriage equality for everyone. And I gave her links to things like a book called Homosexuality in Islam, to a group in the United States that has branches around the world called Muslims for Progressive Values. So these were all things that I know are going to challenge her.
Right.
And she reminds me of myself when I was 19 years old and reaching out to feminists, wanting to challenge my own beliefs.
You must be like a carafe of pure, clean water to parched throats in Nigeria, for example. Talking about gay rights, talking about feminism. When you go to Pakistan, God knows what will happen. But you're also going into seriously dangerous places. Has there been any blowback? Has there been any threats? Is the security strong? How does that function?
Well, in Nigeria, the book festival I attended, called the Ake Arts and Book Festival, is in a town called Abeokuta. And it's about an hour outside of Lagos. And that's not a part of the country that has faced any problems from Boko Haram.
Right.
Most of their violence has been in the north, in the northern parts of the country. So the day before I arrived and the day that I arrived, there were two attacks, one in Yolo and one in Kano, both in the north. But I didn't feel any danger at all. I didn't, for a second think, oh my God, I can't go to Nigeria because of Boko Haram. Because, Egypt has an armed militant campaign.
Yes.
Northern Sinai has an insurgency against the Sisi regime. And in Cairo, 10 minutes from where I live, there was an attack on a police convoy, and I heard the explosion in my apartment.
Yeah.
So, I'm from Egypt. We have this
I
in
know,
Egypt.
I know.
But it was really important to be in Nigeria because at that book festival, For example, there was a panel on LGBT issues in Nigeria. They showed a groundbreaking.
That's
Can you
gutsy.
imagine?
That's incredibly gutsy.
They showed a documentary film on the LGBT community in Nigeria, and on stage were two openly gay Nigerian men, openly identifying as gay. Incredibly gutsy, incredibly courageous in a country that criminalizes quote unquote homosexual activity. So it was wonderful to be there and to be inspired by fellow writers from other African countries.
And when you go to Pakistan, where will you be in Pakistan?
I will be in Lahore, which is considered one of the more progressive cities. And I'm really, again, looking forward to being in a context where I can speak to Pakistanis as a Muslim, coming from Egypt, recognizing that we share similar cultural and religious challenges.
But the force of feminism and the force of your message is a profoundly subversive one. And that's why I worry about you in all the places that you're going.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. The groups like Daesh are essentially murderous, raping thugs. And, most of my work revolves around women's agency over our bodies and women's ability to say, I control my body. That for me is a sexual revolution. I control my body.
That's right.
And obviously for Daesh, they don't want women to control their bodies.
Neither do the fundamentalist Christians in the United States or the Vatican or a lot of other folks as well. But primarily those three groups.
Yes. All of them.
Yeah.
All these religious fundamentalists, and you know my message to them well, Robin, and my message to them is all stay out of my vagina unless I want you in there.
Yes.
Because
perfect message.
Thank you. Because that's essentially what patriarchy and what patriarchal religion does. It wants to control our vaginas because our vaginas are those vectors, the kind of like the corridors to the future, if you will. When they want us to have their babies, they make us have their babies. When they want us not to have their babies, they won't let us have their babies.
Precisely.
So either way, they want to control our vaginas. And the heart of the sexual revolution is no, my vagina is mine.
Well, good luck, all the best possible luck and blessings on you and your vagina, Mona, and your wonderful brain and your courage. And after you visited Pakistan, come back and tell us how that went, will you?
Gladly, Robin. Thank you.
We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back in just a moment speaking with a woman who is hell-bent for election on including the outcluded people of history in history, notably women, notably in the New York Historical Society. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. My next guest, Louise Mirrer, is the president and CEO of the New York Historical Society. Previously, she was the executive vice chancellor for academic affairs at City University of New York, and while at City University, she spearheaded the U.S. History Initiative there. She is launching groundbreaking exhibitions at the New York Historical Society, including the previous outs, the outliers, the other, the erased and discriminated. She's received the Leadership Award, Asian American Research Institution, the New York Post's 50 Most Influential Women in New York Award, the Women Making History Award, many, many other honors, and she is an honorary fellow of Wolfson College, Cambridge. Here is Dr. Louise Mirrer. Dr. Louise Mirrer. Louise, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Very pleased to be here.
Well, congratulations. I mean, what you are doing as the director of the New York Historical Society is quite special. I mean, interestingly enough, since you have been on board, there have been exhibitions on New York and slavery, on the Tiffany girls, that it was women who really did the amazing Tiffany glass shades and designs, and now, ta-da! you are debuting a Women's History Center, which is going to be absolute dynamite. So tell us about it.
Well, the new Center for the Study of Women's History was actually inspired by that Tiffany exhibition, which we debuted in 2006, and it was based on a combination of our extraordinary collection of Tiffany lamps and the discovery by one of my colleagues and some other scholars outside of the New York Historical Society that actually many of Tiffany's lamps were designed by women, that he employed an entire department, all-female department, to design basically the nature-themed lamps, and that this was a hidden story about women's participation in the world of work at a very early time. We don't typically think of the late 19th and early 20th century as a moment of great significance in women's labor history, but indeed it was.
Right.
So that really spawned a whole new spate of research and thinking, really focused on that period and wondering, who were these Tiffany girls? The head of the Tiffany all-female department was Clara Driscoll, a woman who had come to New York from Ohio. And we began to see that actually New York offered opportunities of all kinds for women to work, and they were attracted here not only from the Midwest, but from Eastern and Southern Europe, from the South, really from all over. And we have to keep in mind this was 20 to 30 years before women were full American citizens. They weren't going to have the right to vote until 1920.
Right.
So that that really propelled us along the path that we've taken before. You mentioned slavery in New York. Our institution has been, I think, successful to the degree that it has because it's not a textbook. It tells people something about history that they don't automatically know, they haven't heard before or learned before, and history is just filled with gaps. And, of course, the gaps quite often correspond to particular groups that have been underrepresented in the American narrative, and women are certainly key.
Yeah, well, you've been doing a wonderful work surfacing those groups and rooting them in New York. So as a feminist and a civil rights activist from the get-go years and years ago, and as a New Yorker, I'm so proud of the work that you're doing and so grateful for it. I mean, I really am. So to tell about what the center is going to be doing, I know that you're going to focus particular attention on the connections between women's history and broader movements around labor and justice and health and social welfare, because women were at the forefront of those movements too.
Correct. That is really where we're focusing attention, at least at the start. And we have a suite of activities planned. Some of them are traditional museum kinds of activities, like exhibitions that focus on single women, not meaning unmarried, but single figures, single protagonists. For example, Lillian Walsh, whose name should be well known by anyone and everyone who cares about health and social welfare and social justice, but is practically unknown. I would venture to say not taught, not touched on in most classrooms, not in New York and not in the United States. And here was a woman who really invented the concept that family health was extremely important, that women needed to be instructed as women who stayed home or in the domestic setting, and really were for cultural reasons quite incapable of extracting themselves from horrific tenement slum dwellings. And she just really introduced a huge range of reforms that have made such a difference in our lives. So there will be a combination of exhibitions on figures like that, women artists, but we'll also have an intellectual wing, so that we're doing our first scholarly symposium. As a matter of fact, before the space is even built out this March, we'll be doing a conference, a major conference on seamstresses. Because when you look at the world of women's work, that was and continues to be an area has been dominated or at least participated in largely by women.
Right. Right. Well, that's one because we have such little hands and we're so patient. And so you could.
Well, that goes back. Yeah, that goes back to Tiffany, who thought, well, nature. I want to do nature lamps, and women are much closer to nature.
Oh
so
my God! And it's always amazing to me because what women then did was they took that stereotype and ghettoization and actually tried to turn it into something, and often succeeded, really positive. I mean, and I remember when I first learned. At the beginning of this current contemporary feminist wave in the United States, that basically women were at the forefront of every social justice movement, whether it was Jane Addams in Hull House, or doing away with the prisons, or doing away with debtors' prisons, or halfway houses, or the concept of orphanages, but changing. I mean, it was women, and they all got disappeared. So you have your work cut out for you, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. But listening to what you've just said, you can see now how rereading that history by reinserting women into it will really change people's perception.
Exactly.
Of women, of what women really had to do with the progress that we consider ourselves to have made in many areas.
Right, and all the way back to the founding of the country, a lot of which took place in New York.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And there are so many examples. I mean, really so many examples of women who, we wish they were in Washington today. In fact, many people argue that one of the reasons for such dysfunction is because families no longer, politicians no longer come with their families. And,
so there's no woman at home saying, George, Henry, you really have to do this.
Absolutely, and there are no women who are, presiding over a dinner table to which they invite people from different walks of life.
Exactly.
Who are charged with making decisions and have them around the table in a setting. It does sound like a woman's space, but it works. It worked, and there are many examples of women who really brought compromise, which really is quite important to political decision making.
Yes,
around their dinner table or in their drawing room, or
Washington could certainly use some of that these days. And many people don't know that Stanton and Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton the Great, and Susan B. Anthony were New York based, each of them at different times for a very long time, for the major work that they did.
That's right. You could just focus on New York and really tell the history of women's suffrage,
right.
And you could certainly tell the histories of basically every strand of the larger American life that has had women implicated fully.
Louise, this is going to be so exciting because the great Sackler Center for Feminist Art at the Brooklyn and the National Museum of Women in the Arts, of which I'm a founding member in Washington. They're focusing on women artists, and that's I'm obviously wonderful and terrific. But you're one of the first institutions to devote permanent space to women's history exhibitions and scholarship. So the late Gerda Lerner would be very proud of you.
Yeah, no, it's the right thing to do. I mean, we will work with those other institutions.
Sure.
They're marvelous places. But honestly, you do have to wonder, why is there no permanent place in any cultural institution where you can learn this history, where you can learn about the history of women?
Well, there will be now. When does it formally open? I can't wait.
The physical spaces will be opened at the beginning of 2017, which in museum time is right around the corner, and it will come quickly enough. But we've broken ground. This is on the 4th floor, so we haven't broken that kind of ground. You've broken metaphorical ground.
Right, you've broken floor. Right.
Right. And the spaces alone will be quite dazzling, and. Remarkably, we've engaged a woman designer, architect, Eva Jurekna, who is incredibly talented, and a woman filmmaker, Donna Lawrence, who is doing a fabulous multimedia film for us, which focuses on New York women at the beginning of the 20th century, and thinks forward to the influence of those women on our contemporary lives today.
Oh, this is so exciting. And there's going to be an interactive wall called Women's Voices.
Yes, because we think that, first of all, the impact of women on our history didn't stop in some determined year in the past. It continues.
Sure.
And so this will be a feature that will allow us to continue to update the history, the stories that we tell, but it will also amplify the number of stories that we tell. And we keep discovering really new figures. I was talking to one of our city council members, and he said, well, would you like to meet the first woman to drive a subway?
Oh.
And I was like, first of all, it tells you a lot that this first woman to drive a subway is still around.
Yeah, I'll say.
There are a lot of jobs that women really still don't do, and or came very late to. So we'll be able to tell those kinds of stories as well as stories of women who are more embedded in the past.
Oh, this is just so exciting. Tell the website so people can keep track of it as it grows.
Well, you can go on our www.newyorkhistory.org website, and you can
keep track of it.
Just click on Center for the Study of Women's History, and you can keep track.
Oh, this is just wonderful. So that's nyhistory.org. And then look for women. Look for the and celebrate it. Thank you so much for doing this. We will come back to you closer to the time of the opening. We'll keep track in the meanwhile. I celebrate it, and I thank you, as I say, as a feminist and a New Yorker. And thanks also for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, too.
Thanks so much. Pleasure.
And now it's time for us to visit the Surrealism Corner. The Surrealism Corner today is quite crowded with material about Daesh. You may remember, but I'm going to repeat it anyway again and again to try to get people to use it, that Daesh is the name we use on this program to describe the Islamic State, so-called, or ISIL. Although I predicted their eventual appearance in my book on the roots of terrorism, The Demon Lover. The first edition was way back in 1989. It still is hard to believe that they now exist and do the things they do. So I found myself watching some of their recruitment videos that were on a documentary on television, and then one of them stopped me in my tracks. It was a recruitment video with one guy, garbed all in black and with a full beard, as usual, standing, alternately glaring and smiling into the camera and speaking in Arabic. Standing right beside him was another guy, also in black, also with the beard, also looking into the camera, smiling and signing. Yeah, he was using sign language to convey the message. And I thought, oh my God, this is an even more sophisticated operation than I had thought. It has taken me 40 years to get campuses around the United States to have a signer present when I give lectures, and even so, even today, sometimes they still claim they just don't have anybody available, and besides, it probably isn't necessary because hearing-impaired people on their campus do not attend lectures. To which I respond that if they don't attend lectures, that's probably because they know signers won't be there. But wow, Daesh is there. I was rather impressed by this, thinking that they're going after everybody, including deaf or hard-of-hearing recruits, and they are. But then I remembered that this might not be due to their having necessarily a higher consciousness about disability issues. The standard practice on TV news throughout the Arab world is to always have a signer. Yeah. Because there's a disproportionately high rate of deafness as well as of blindness, and that in turn is due to a high rate of forced or arranged cousin marriage, usually to keep property in the family. It always comes down to sexism and controlling women's fertility and bodies, doesn't it? So, Daesh may just have picked up this otherwise good idea from current Arab television newscast, but nevertheless it's revealing about their seriousness and their attention to detail. On the other hand, they seem to live in their own totally surreal world. For example, the videographers and camera people and sound people and lighting folks and set designers and makeup artists and musicians who compose these highly professional videos with music background and pictorial dissolves and camera angles, they are treated as a special class, an elite class. And they do not, you understand, have to kill and die the way the poor schmucks they recruit do. Furthermore, the propaganda videos are staged. I don't mean they don't actually happen. No, people are caged, they are whipped, they are burned, they are beheaded. That's on camera and real, but that's also, wait for it, rehearsed. I'm trying to imagine, I guess the director says, no, we need to retake that. I didn't like the light slant on that. Or, I want you to deliver your harangue with more emotion. Feel it, man, feel it. Well, of course, you can't do a retake if this is a beheading, so I can only assume they pantomime fake that until they get it just right while the helpless victim being beheaded is waiting. Talk about torture. Then they edit the finished product into a slick presentation backed by the very music that they forbid their own followers to listen to. This is like a staged pornography of violence. Actually, they're doing reality TV. Add to this the fact that the young males who compose so much of the troops, teenage men through men in their late 20s, especially those who have joined Daesh from European or North American countries, they have been trained by the use of video games. Yeah, Daesh uses video games to teach shooting skills, and they also use video games, which often have encrypted codes, to communicate. So, you have a set of young males learning violence on video games back home, and then training on them, and then doing violence for staged videos. Apparently competition is rife, both among the troops and, for that matter, between the various militant groups performing or wanting to perform terrorist acts. And on top of the story now come the hackers, who invaded individual personal privacy and even U.S. government security on their way to being heroes of the left, the male left. They are going to be the saviors here. Video games, hackers, rehearsed beheadings, the use of sign language to recruit men to kill and die. All this and more. You know, you can't make this kind of thing up. Remember that I told you today's Surrealism Corner was very crowded indeed. Time for another short pause here. I'm Robin Morgan at Women's Media Center Live, and do not go away, because upcoming is the story I promised you, a real feel-good story, not sentimental, but happy, joyous, and practical.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with that feel-good story I promised you. It's about hot bread and women's empowerment, and it's all been made to rise, just like dough, by a woman named Jessamyn Rodriguez. Here she is. Jessamyn Rodriguez, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, bravissima for your work. You started out, you've been a social justice activist. You became a professional baker. I am in awe on both fronts. I'm a social justice activist, and I bake for love. but not, bread primarily.
The best reason to bake.
Well, it's just that, baking bread, even when it's rising, and much less when it's more when it's in the oven, even though I'm a joyful atheist, nothing smells better except possibly God. Then baking bread is the smell of, if there were a God, that's how it would smell. So tell us about this wonderful organization that you founded, which is a great roaring success and really good for women and other living things, called Hot Bread Kitchen. How did it come to be?
The idea behind Hot Bread Kitchen is that in most parts of the world, women have the godly job of baking bread, and they make bread for their families, and somehow in North America and in Europe, good baking jobs aren't going to women, but they're going to men. So I had this epiphany in a hilarious way now, well over a decade ago. When I was trying to really forge my career in social justice, I interviewed at Women's World Banking, which is a great microfinance institution, and it was sort of an executive and assistant job that I didn't get. But I was telling someone about the interview, and he heard Women's World Baking instead of Women's World Banking. I know, and it was really that slip of the tongue, those three words together, that created this vision of an immigrant women's baking collective. And then I was like, well, I'm not a baker, and I'm not an immigrant woman. At that point, I was still living in my home country, my birth city, which is Toronto. And I kind of tabled the idea, and I went ahead and I forged a career in what I thought social justice needed to be, like a desk job at the UN or working for the Canadian government. I worked in the Canadian Landmine Foundation for the Canadian government for a while, and that's what I thought social justice needed to look like. And then I ended up living in Latin America, and I finally moved to New York City, and I was still thinking about Women's World Baking. I still had this idea, and then in 2006, I was like, okay, well, let me see if I like to bake. I'm a foodie. I love great food. I think about food. I was like working in the secretariat office at the UN, but always thinking about like, what am I going to make for dinner? What am I going to make for lunch? So cooking, it was always been my passion, but it never worked in a commercial kitchen. So I got an apprenticeship in a bakery, and you know what? I loved it. I the sense, the smell, the camaraderie, the hilariousness of just, working with a product that's like on such a tight time schedule just was really appealing to me. So I apprenticed for 2 years while I was doing my day job. So I'd wake up super early and then go to the bakery and, bake some bread and then get dressed up and go back out to Brooklyn and do my work. It was like a crazy couple of years, well before I had kids. And I did that. And while I was doing that, I started to write the business plan and learn more about social enterprise, and spent a lot of time in a few social enterprises that I really thought were doing a great job of it. And in 2008, I incorporated as a nonprofit, and it's been a wild ride since then.
It's just incredible. I mean, and you train low-income immigrant and minority women, and you also now rent kitchen space to small businesses, and you train and then employ these women. So, I mean, it is social justice activism in the real activism level, freed from abstract policy waffling. I mean, with all due respect to desk jobs, you're doing the real thing.
Yeah, now my job sadly is mainly a desk job and a schmoozing job, but I really believe now that for, the best way to empower a woman, the best way to equal the playing field is give her a job where she feels successful. And so what we do in the Bakers in Training program is we help women who have barriers to employment. For many of them, that's like limited English proficiency and no work experience. We also train women who are coming out of situations of domestic violence or who have recently been incarcerated. There's kind of a whole host of barriers to employment that we serve. And then we provide a paid 6-month on-the-job training program, upon which if women make it through the full training program, they're guaranteed a job in a company, in a bakery, where they can eventually move up to kind of a manager. And so it's not just like, well, here's a job, it's not like workforce development. We're like connecting you with a job that has nothing that you're kind of interested in. But the best thing about it is we're putting them in a career where they can say, like, I have market valued skills in an area where they have passion and interest. We're looking for women who love food, like me. That's kind of the target.
It's so beautiful because it's training and then employing and encouraging and also respecting the cultures that they come from, because you do breads, my dear, don't you? You do Miss Ma'am, and you do tortillas, and you do, I mean, it's the stuff of life you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of what makes us a social enterprise is that all of the bread that we sell, and you can buy our bread at hotbreadkitchen.org, all of the bread that we sell is supporting more women in the training program. So we are truly a social enterprise model in that we're selling the breads from the countries that women come from. And you can tell someone, that America is a country that is a melting pot, or, we're a country that respects and values the contribution of immigrant communities. But to see that there's a market for the products and the food that they make is the best way to signal to people that, like, you know what? We love it. Like, I am so happy that we live in a city with so many different people, because I get to eat their food, like,
yes.
At a bare minimum.
Yes, me too. I mean, the first time I was ever in Copenhagen, which is a perfectly beautiful city, I kept feeling weirdly uncomfortable. And finally I realized that it was spotlessly clean, and that everyone there had golden eyelashes and golden eyebrows, and they looked like they just stepped out of an Ingmar Bergman movie. And what I missed was the different patina of different skin colors of a New York street, and the way you can't walk down one street without hearing 3 different dialects and 4 different languages, and bread, of all things, which is the stuff of life and is women's terrain, to take that and turn that into a money-making enterprise for poor and immigrant women is so cool. And it's such a matter of pride then also, because they bring the recipes from their own cultures.
Exactly.
I mean,
I couldn't say it better myself.
What's not to love? What's not to love about what you do? And there's a cookbook too, isn't there?
Yeah, so we just published our first cookbook, which is a collection of recipes from the women who bake with us. Some of the recipes that for breads that we make in the bakery, and then a handful of recipes that come from my families. But most importantly, it's also stories of the women and the kind of the impact that the work that we're doing has had on their lives. And a few tips mattered in about social enterprise and how to start and run a social enterprise.
This is a wonderful solstice gift, it seems to me. I'm going to go on your website right away and order a number of copies of this, because Hot Bread Kitchen Cookbook sounds like the perfect holiday gift. Congratulations on the work that you do, Jessamyn. It is just, you must be very happy to have all the elements of your life come together in this fashion.
I'm happy to be included in the kinds of guests that you have. So thank you for having me on, and I wish you all the best.
Well, I wish you all the best, and I'm going to become a regular customer now, and I will also think of you every time that I bake bread in my own humble individual fashion. But with
send us some pictures.
All right, I will do that.
Or come bake with us.
There's always that, although I would be shy among professionals. But still, you're doing such beautiful work. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Again, listeners, it's Hot Bread Kitchen Cookbook, and you can find it and other information about ordering the product itself at hotbreadkitchen.org. Thank you, Jessamyn Rodriguez, for everything you do and for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
We're coming up on one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back with some fighting words, so stick around.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. We live in dangerous times. Given such times, and given TV, radio, online, and print news that brim with wall-to-wall violence, plus the 24/7 mounting anxiety many people are feeling, It's not surprising that lots of folks are depressed and in a general state of unease, intensified, not alleviated by the holiday season. Perhaps you are, too. Well, so am I. But we need to live, and in fact to live vibrantly and intelligently in order to change this. So I want to offer a small list of humble acts that work for me when I'm trying to rouse myself from the malaise swamp. I won't include stuff that probably wouldn't be all that helpful to most folks, like, say, wrestling with revisions on my new poem. No, these are more general. Still, they may not all work for you, but even if one or two does, that might be useful. So, 1. If, like me, you're a news junkie, take a break. This is harder than it sounds because something in me is absolutely convinced that the moment I turn off CNN or shut off my cell phone's ping that automatically announces news break updates from the New York Times and BBC, that very moment will be when World War III breaks out and I will somehow miss it. But the truth is that turning off the ping on my phone and restricting my news intake to the New York Times in the morning, a check online midday, another maybe late afternoon, and then news in the evening mostly does suffice. When there is breaking news, of course, this becomes impossible, but at least, it's worth a try. Worst of all is to let oneself watch the news in bed before falling asleep, or rather before trying to fall asleep. So don't. 2. I also have tried with limited success to go off the grid one day a week, usually a weekend day when I can forcibly restrain myself from checking email and social media. Now, it's true that this makes me feel like an absolute ignoramus, a Luddite, and someone living in a cave, but in a sense, that's the point. There is absolutely no way to be marinated in information, much less violent information, without the attendant stress that it induces. In those few hours when I am online free, my pace changes, and I literally can feel that I breathe differently, slower, deeper. 3. Perform a random act of kindness. This is not as sappy a suggestion as it may sound, nor do I mean send a check to a charity or a Hallmark card to somebody. I mean something you need to do yourself. For example, I rang up a particular acquaintance who can be long-winded, whiny, and a bit boring, but who's been ill and frankly deserved some attention. I'd been putting it off with a sense of irritation because I knew I ought to do it at some point. Having done it, I confess that I feel not warmly self-satisfied, but at least I feel a bit more human, and I've spread some cheer. 4. Do something physical and constructive. In spring and summer, for me, this means the healing act of working in my little city garden. In fall and winter, it means making soup or baking bread. This is especially satisfactory because I can punch up the dough and pretend it's Donald Trump or Ted Cruz. A close woman friend cleans her apartment top to bottom when feeling blue and comes away with a feeling of accomplishment as well as a clean apartment. Another friend satisfyingly polishes all her silverware, which does not work if you don't have polishable silverware. But there's always rearranging your books or CDs, or doing your closets and doors. I realize these are mostly things women do, but men could learn them and would also feel better doing them. By the way, if men did such things, women would also feel better about men. There's the category, number 5, of hedonistic, sybaritic, utterly self-indulgence, the category of doing something for yourself, painful though that might be for many women. This is the long hot bubble bath with a candle in the bathroom category, the chocolate bar category, the Haagen-Dazs ice cream or frozen yogurt category, eaten with a spoon direct from the container. And it's also the put your favorite music on, do not multitask, simply lie back and listen to it category. Number 6, last but never least, invite over a friend who is similarly down in the dumps. Promise each other not to discuss politics for once. Spoiler alert, this may not be possible. And sit down to watch or stream a guilty pleasures movie. Now, I do not mean a film, not something that will challenge the intellect and is deplorably relevant. I mean a movie, a romantic comedy, a piece of frippery, a nice superficial silliness. If none of these tricks work for you, make up your own. Remember that the message of Daesh or ISIL and of the purveyors of hate, that message is joylessness. So arm yourself with some joy. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Regina K. Scully is our founding sponsor. Julie Burton, Women's Media Center President, is executive producer. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.